Welcome back everybody to another one of my videos, and this is going to be the first video in a new series I'm going to be doing on this channel that I'm going to be calling the Aviation News Roundup. Basically what it sounds like. I'm going to be doing a monthly video just doing some highlights of some aviation news from the previous month. So my plan right now, I'm going to be dropping these videos probably the first Monday of the month, and it's going to cover all the news from the previous month. Might seem like weird. Monday, it's my day off, so I'm able to actually spend the time to do all the work I need to do to get this video ready to be uploaded and make sure it gets out to you in a timely manner. Eventually, down the road, if this takes off, I might look at turning this into a live broadcast, possibly. Something along those lines. I don't know yet. I haven't gotten that far. For now, it's just going to be a roundup. Kind of like this. I have some notes on my computer. I'll be talking, and I'll be throwing up the odd picture here and there to highlight what I'm talking about. And just a warning ahead of time, I am fighting the tail end of a cold, so I'll be coughing off and on. I'll make sure I mute the cough, but just you'll see me hacking up a lung, so I apologize in advance for that. But yeah, so let's jump right into this. And before we do, as always, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. And just before we do jump into this video, I want to say thank you for everybody who is out there watching. If you haven't yet and you do enjoy what you're watching, down below, hit the like, subscribe, notification bell. The like and subscribe will just allow YouTube to know more of who is interested in my videos and push this content out to others who could be interested. And the notification bell will let you know when I release new videos, usually, you know, 4, maybe, well, now with this about 5 a month, give or take, is my usual schedule. If you guys like to help out in a little bit more of a supportive way, down below again, you'll see a link to my coffee account down in the description. You can always buy me a coffee. As usual, I have one on the go. And it always helps a little bit to offset some of the costs if you do choose to do that, but please don't feel obligated. I'm not out here begging for money. As well, if going forward with these news roundups, if you have anything out there that you think I should be including in this, any interesting news articles you see out there, down below in the description, you'll see an email address, news@seans-aviation.com. You can send any ideas that way, articles, anything like that, just 2 sentences, whatever, even 2 words, I don't care. If you would like to try to contribute to this and you think there's something that should be added, send it to that email. I'll be checking that periodically, and if I do find it interesting, I will be adding to it. As well, just so you guys can excuse me. Yeah, just so you guys can get an idea of what I plan to include in this. There'll be generic big aviation headline newses. I'm tired. Big major aviation headlines in the news. I might be doing some talking about some of the more recent aviation incidences or follow-ups to older incidences that I find to be interesting for overall aviation safety. Some air show news, specifically, you know, we're talking kind of North America, as well as just generic. Now, again, you have to remember I'm in Canada, and I'm very much a civil aviation warbird guy. So I'm going to be gearing this towards what I find interesting. But by all means, like I said, if there's something that you think should be added, throw it my way. Don't take this as any kind of complete coverage of the aviation news, because that's not what it is. I have my laptop here, which I will be referencing my notes. I'm just trying to figure out why my screen is so dark that I can't see anything. There we go. Okay, so, excuse me again. Okay, so big headlines. I guess it technically goes back farther than February, but I'm bringing it up because it is a big headline, and that is that the RCAF has officially selected the F-35 as the replacement for the CF-18. Now, this is big in a number of reasons. One, we're finally getting a CF-18 replacement. They are getting extremely long in tooth. They need to be replaced. It's about time we finally got something else to help offset those. It's also been a very long, contentious program. For anybody who hasn't followed the procurement process for the replacement fighter for the RCAF. We joined on the JSF program very early on. Excuse me. Canada has been a partner on it from the very beginning. We are a supplier in the program. We pay in every year to be a supplier. We provide a number of components for the F-35 productions. For every F-35 that rolls off the production line, there is a large component of that is Canadian because we buy into it. And because the JSF program was a selection process, when that ended with the selection of the F-35 as the JSF, Canada went ahead and selected it as well. And a previous government ordered them, purchased them, everything, and said we'd do it. A lot of backlash. They decided to do a review of the program. So the purchase was put on hold. There was then a federal election. A new party was elected, and that party had promised to never purchase the F-35, as it was too much for what Canada needed. We would never buy the F-35. That whole thing started with from the ground up process to look at the requirements for the new fighter. We went through the whole thing. It looked like the Super Hornet was the leading aircraft. We actually had done a sole source purchase for a number of Super Hornets to offset the significant downgraded capability of our current Hornets and the fact that we have so few airframes. And then Boeing ended up filing some lawsuits against Bombardier with the C series, which then became the Airbus A220, and the federal government basically slapped Boeing's hand, canceled the Super Hornet order, and then the process went through and we selected the F-35 just within the past month or so as the replacement fighter. So it's been a long, drawn-out process, but I feel we finally, regardless of the airframe we picked, we finally got an aircraft to replace the CF-18. It's done, it's purchased, we're there, finally. So that the deal includes 88 F-35As, so that's the U.S. Air Force version of the aircraft, and they will be fitted with drag chutes, very similar to the Norwegian aircraft, also have drag chutes, and that's just because of, especially up in the north, you get some areas with shorter runways, contaminated runways. They need the drag chute to ensure the aircraft can be slowed down in time, depending on what airports they go into. Not a bad thing to have. Now that also rolls into something else, as the F-35A doesn't have the hose and probe refueling system that we currently use. We have the CF-18s, which have the Navy style hose and probe, or the hose and drogue, depending on how you look at it, or drogue and probe. There's multiple ways of calling it, but basically there's a basket and there's a probe that goes in the basket and you pump fuel. Very different from the Air Force, where they fly the wing down and put it into the top of the plane. So there's two different ways of doing fueling. Our whole system is set up for the U.S. Navy style. We have the 310s that are modified with the wing tanks, or the wing drogues, and then we have a couple of C-130s, KC-130s, well, we don't call them that, but effectively, that also do tanker with the CF-18s. Those aren't going to be usable with the F-35. Now, that being said, there had also been a push in conjunction with that to replace the 310s, and they've already announced that they're buying A330s, and that those A330s will eventually be sent off to the conversion. I believe it's in Spain or France, where they convert them into the full-on tankers, very similar to what the British and the Australians currently use, which was leading towards the belief that we would pick the F-35, because we don't need those tankers for the Super Hornets. So there's a lot of evidence that the F-35 was going to be selected, but until it was officially announced, there we are. So we'll also see new tankers in conjunction with these new F-35s. Now, overall, it is a $19 billion contract. That seems like a lot of money for 88 aircraft, but when you factor that in, that 88, what did I say it was? $19 billion includes the purchase of the airframes, construction of new base infrastructure, the new hangars and all the equipment that is needed for the F-35s. We need newer style hangars in some cases for maintenance, plus with this transition between the two airframes, we need extra hangar space to accommodate both aircraft types until the full conversion happens. So it includes all that base infrastructure, and it includes long-term maintenance and training costs. So overall, it's not a bad deal when you factor in what other countries are paying for it. We're paying a very low per airframe cost for that purchase. We're supposed to be getting the first 4 aircraft in 2026. and then 18 by the end of 2028, and the full fleet will be in Canada by 2032. That's not full operational. That's just all the aircraft being in Canada. There's still going to be a long process to get it updated and get them in use, but we have a process to get there. If you hold on one second, I just realized I don't have my mic plugged in. Let me get the mic plugged in and we'll continue with some better audio. So yes, apologies for that. So F-35 purchase, definitely a good thing. We'll see where that all pans out in the long run, but we are moving forward with that progress. Next, the headline that is probably the most talked about headline over the past 30 days, and those were the Chinese balloon shootdowns. Now, I mean, recently there hasn't been quite as much. It was a flurry of news for like 2 weeks, and then everybody basically forgot about it. I think there's a lot more going on here than we're being told right now. That very first balloon, the one that crossed the United States and was shot down over the coast of the Carolinas, I believe that was legitimately. I mean, China even admitted it was theirs. They said it wasn't a spy balloon. Interestingly, there was a U-2 that was circling it, snooping on it, pictures and some electromagnetic snooping of what transmissions were coming out of that balloon, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with the U.S. asserting it was a spy balloon and not simply a weather balloon. Interestingly, the pilot took a selfie with it. I'll put that picture up. You can see the picture, the selfie of the U-2 pilot with the balloon. That one, clearly there was something going on. We had that huge sort of gantry that was hanging below it. It had solar panels. It looked kind of like a space station hanging under there. The balloon changed direction a few times, which showed that it had some form of propulsion and was steerable. So clearly there was more to it than just a weather balloon. The other ones that got shot down, if memory serves me, there's one off the north coast of Alaska, one over the Canadian Yukon, and one over, I believe it was Lake Michigan. Maybe it was Lake Erie. No, Michigan. Huron. Maybe it was Lake Huron. I think it was Lake Huron it got shot down in. Either way, a number of those look to just be, amateur balloons. There's a lot of people who do that. They send balloons up with a transmitter, and you can track the balloon as it goes around the world. And I have a feeling some of those other balloons could have just been, ham radio users or just, school groups or that kind of stuff. There was one group that claimed they had a balloon somewhere near Alaska, the Yukon area, and they believe theirs was one of the ones that was shot down in the north. I think if we ever do get more info from the government on that, and if I find more, I'll update these as we go. That's kind of the point of this, is this running news commentary, so I might get more updates in the future on this. But I have a distinct feeling that some of those were weather balloons and not Chinese at all, and really the first one was the only one we had to worry about. A lot of people were questioning why they didn't shoot that balloon down before it crossed the United States, and it was discovered over Montana. And then it crossed the U.S., kind of going southeast. It kicked out and kind of went directly east and crossed over, like as I said, into the Atlantic, over the Carolinas. And the thing was at 60,000 feet, and there was a substantial amount of material on that. It's not just a rubber balloon, like a blow-up party balloon. This thing's huge, and it's got all that metal gantry and equipment hanging off of it. You shoot that down from 60,000 feet, there's no telling where it's going to land. Even out over the middle of nowhere, over Kansas or Montana, there's still a good chance that thing comes down into somebody's property and does damage or even kills somebody. So not shooting it down over the continental United States made a lot of sense for the general safety of the public. Hence why it was over the ocean when they took it down. As well, the less damage of it hitting the water over the land, so it's easier to recover more material in that sense. Yeah, so I mean that was the big news. I think until we get more reports on those Chinese balloons, we're not going to know very much more. So time will tell on that. Just as another quick aside, while we're talking about some military stuff, it has been announced that the United States Navy is replacing a bunch of their King Airs. They currently have a fleet They currently have a fleet of 61 King Air 90s that they use for multi-engine flight training, and they're going to be replacing them with 64 King Air 260s. Now, for those who don't know the ins and outs of the King Air, basically the King Air 260, it's a King Air 200, which is just a little larger than the 90. Slightly more powerful engines, quite a bit more fuel capacity on the 200, and the 260 would be the same aircraft but with a glass cockpit and FADEC engines, full digitally controlled engines, full authority digital engine control. So the throttles aren't linkages to the engine. Your throttles are running a computer, and the computer controls the engines. You get a lot more fidelity out of the engines, and you can program and you can play with them, and you can get a lot better fuel efficiency out of them. So that's the 260s. Not that it's overall amazing news, but it's just nice to see that there are these upgrades. A lot of the King Air 90s that are still flying date back to the 70s and whatnot. So even later in some cases. So the U.S. Navy is upgrading. All of their King Air 90s are retired. They're going to be getting 64 brand new King Air 260s as their new multi-engine training. Now, just quickly, we'll talk about some air show news. The United States Navy's F-35C Demo schedule was recently released, and they only have 9 shows. Now, the U.S. Navy doesn't do a lot of air shows. They do a lot less than the Air Force, and there's a really big reason for that. The U.S. Air Force, they use a dedicated demo team. And it's also the way they operate. The Air Force, you're at a base, right? Your demo team, the F-16 demo is based at Shaw. The F-35 demo is based at Luke. The A-10 is based at Davis-Monthan. And the F-22, I don't know where the F-22 unit is based. But anyways, the F-20, they're based at a specific air base. And you're always there. Navy squadrons rotate. The unit that's at a base in January might be deployed on a ship by June or July. So the only units the U.S. Navy has that are always based at a land base that you can use to do air shows are the training units. And the Navy's been having issues recently with training. They're behind the ball getting pilots trained up. They were having issues with aircraft availability. So their training units have been stressed and pushed to their limit getting pilots trained. So try to find the time to send these pilots, not only to train up a demo and have it done safely, but send them out to air shows all year long. You're taking resources away from getting active pilots trained up for the operations. So they have to prioritize their operational needs over the air shows. So the Navy tends to have a lot less air show participation, especially with dedicated demo units, than the Air Force. So like as I said, the F-35 Charlie U.S. Navy demo schedule only has 9 shows. They have been known to add more as the year goes on, but it's still pretty low. If I haven't yet, I'll throw the picture up with the actual schedule so you guys can see what the schedule looks like, see if it's going to be going to an air show near you. But, yeah, it would have been nice if they could have a bit more out there. As an air show guy, it's a little frustrating to see them with such a short little show. Now, we'll do a quick discussion on some aviation incidences that have happened recently and some follow-ups. I'll probably keep the same format every time I do these, so you can jump in and find out kind of the specific information you want to see. You can find it. So incidences, recently there was a Qatar 787 that lost 1,000 feet immediately after So recently there was a Qatar 787, took off out of Doha, and immediately after takeoff on the climb out, the aircraft quickly lost 1,000 feet before recovering and climbing out. And it got within, I believe it was like 800 feet of the surface of the ocean before it recovered. And then days later, we learned that United had a very similar incident with a 777 out of Hawaii back in December of 2022. And there's no details yet on the Qatari one. We'll have to wait for the preliminary report to come out on that. But the initial information from the United incident with the 777 was that it was an improper setting in the autopilot. Now, this isn't official from the NTSB or anything like that, or the FAA. This is some theories brought forth by other pilots when they say it's very possible to have your autopilot improperly set. So instead of having the altitude set to like a climb altitude, if you pick the wrong setting, it locks in the altitude of the aircraft while it was sitting at the terminal. So it's possible you're going to take off on the climb out, you push your autopilot, your VNAV, but instead of it grabbing an altitude from your flight plan, it grabbed the altitude from the terminal. So it's now trying to descend back down to what effectively is surface altitude. So it's just an improper setting in the autopilot. And probably the only reason why the United incident came up was because this happened to Qatar, and somebody's like, well, didn't that just happen to United? And the FAA is like, no, we didn't hear about this. So then the incident came to light. If that's the issue, if it's just an improper altitude setting, you might see some changes with the way autopilot procedures are done or cross-checks or anything like that to ensure it doesn't happen again. It's just interesting that it kind of happened twice in the span of a month or a month and a half. But yeah, the FAA is investigating the United incident out of Hawaii. We should get a full report on that when they're done. And then the Aviation Authority in Qatar is looking into that incident. And I'm sure Boeing and the FAA are also involved in that one as well, especially considering the United incident. A quick follow-up on the Yeti ATR crash. Now, if you hadn't heard about that, it was, I believe there was actually video out there of the incident. The ATR was coming in to land in Pokhara, Nepal on January 15th, and on short final, the aircraft basically stalled out, spun in, crashed, killing everybody on board. Now, from the what we can figure out from the latest report we got from the Nepalese officials, the FO, or the pilot not flying, I should say, the pilot not flying selected props to feather instead of flaps 30. And I'll throw up a picture here of the ATR throttle quadrant. And these are your prop selector levers, and this is your flap lever. Now, they might look similar in the picture, but after reading a couple of different accounts and listening to other people talk, they're saying, from ATR pilots, the feel between the two of those are very different. When you grab the prop condition levers, they feel very different from the flaps lever. It should not have happened that happened. Now, usually you see a situation like that with a low time pilot flying. Interestingly, in this case, the pilot flying was a captain going through training. So the captain, pilot flying, was a high time captain going through some training. The pilot not flying was a very experienced captain who was operating as a check pilot. So the pilot not flying was a highly experienced instructor who still made this mistake. So it'll be very interesting to see if they can come up with a reason why that mistake happened. Now, while it sounds, it comes across very similar to what happened. So you can imagine in this case, the plane's coming into land, you're on short final, the pilot calls out for flaps 30, the pilot not flying in the right seat grabs the prop conditions, puts them into feather, you lose all your thrust, the plane crashes. It's very similar to an incident that happened a number of years ago. It was in 2015, the Trans-Asia crash, and there was a lot of video of that, dash cam footage and whatnot, of this ATR rolling over and crashing by a highway overpass. And in that case, the plane, I believe it had just taken off, and they had an engine failure. So I don't remember the details, but let's say the left engine failed. The pilot feathered the right prop. So now you've got a dead engine on the left with an unfeathered prop, and your engine on the right that has power has a feathered prop. So it was effectively the same, well, not the same situation, but they feathered the wrong engine, you lost all your thrust, the plane crashed. In this case, they feathered both engines by mistake instead of flaps, and the outcome was exactly the same. So it's a very interesting that they're both very similar, but came about in different ways. So I'm just curious to see kind of, again, what changes might be made to an ATR cockpit or procedurally wise, either that, to ensure that this doesn't happen. Because it's odd that we had two somewhat similar accidents, happen with very similar outcomes. Finally, we're going to do one more quick update on an incident. Last year, there was a B-25 Old Glory. It had been in Hawaii for a number of events. I believe there was an air show in Hawaii, and a number of warbirds were actually sent across on an aircraft carrier, and they were brought back and were offloaded in California, and they all flew home. And Old Glory was one of these B-25s. So it left, I believe it left from San Diego, and it was hopping its way across the U.S. getting back home, and the aircraft ended up landing short of the runway, hit the ground, hit a ditch, ripped the landing gear off. The plane was heavily, heavily damaged. I think I have a picture here I'll put up of the aircraft after it hit the ground. And the NTSB report came out, and basically it turns out the aircraft ran out of fuel. Plain and simple, the aircraft ran out of fuel. And it's the reason why I'm bringing it up. I wouldn't normally be bringing up something like that, other than the aircraft ran out of fuel. They flew a B-25 empty. The air crew had stated that they tracked their fuel usage by math because the fuel gauges were inaccurate. So they estimated a certain amount of burn per hour, and they factored, okay, if we fill the tanks, we get this much gas, we burn this much an hour, we have this many hours of flying before we run out of gas. But the math didn't work out properly. They estimated they would have had a certain amount of fuel left. There was less than a gallon in each tank when the NTSB dipped the tanks. After interviewing, there's a pilot, a co-pilot, and a flight engineer. And the report records the flight engineer as a passenger because the flight engineer isn't an official crew position on a B-25. But the flight engineer claimed that he tried to dip the tanks at one of his stops, and the captain said, "Don't bother, we need to go, we're in a rush, let's go." It also turns out that they weren't accounting for climb out. Their fuel usage was just based off of cruise power and cruise burn. They weren't calculating the extra fuel used for taxi or a takeoff or initial climb out when your fuel usage goes through the roof. And they had done multiple short flights. So if you took off and cruised for 5 hours and then landed, your burn per hour would average out. But if you're flying for 5 hours, but you're landing every hour, right? You're not cruising. You're constantly high power settings takeoff and land. High power settings takeoff and land. You're burning a lot more fuel than expected. And I think this goes back to a firm belief I have when it comes to everything in life, not just aviation. Trust, but verify. If you're going to base all of your fuel calculations on math, and you better dip those tanks and make sure your math is accurate. Because if they had even just once dipped the tanks, they would have realized that math number on my piece of paper is very different than what I have in the wings, and I got to figure out why. And it just shows to a very lax, seat of the pants style operation, and that's not how we should be operating warbirds. And that's why I bring that up. I'm not going to go into too many details about it because it had already been seen. I'm sure everybody out there had seen the videos and heard the stories, but we had the incident a number of months ago of the mid-air collision in Dallas between Texas Raiders and the P-63, and that was very much a same situation where there just was not enough positive control of what was happening. You're flying a warbird, you're flying a B-25, dip your tanks. Either dip your tanks every flight and know exactly how much fuel you have in the tanks, or top the tanks off on every flight and reset to a known value. Don't just assume that your back of the napkin calculations are working. And that's the same as with that incident in Texas where they had told the flight trail, but they never verified that the guy at the end of the trail, who's, a half mile out, had traffic in sight. The leader had traffic in sight, but what about the guy behind? There just wasn't enough positive control. And now I don't want to go into too much on that because we don't have the final report, and anything else at this point is for the most part speculation. And as much as I like to be a Monday morning quarterback, I don't necessarily would like to broadcast my opinions through here. It's going to be mostly factual information that I can bring up using known reports and known articles. So obviously, whenever the final report from that incident comes out with Texas Raiders, I will have an update on here. But it's just a good example. Always do the math. Always double check. Trust, but verify. So that rounds up all of the big news highlights that I have for February. So as always, like I said, I'd like to do this once a month. So we'll see you all again next month. If you have anything you think should be included in the next month's news video, as I said down below, find that email, send it over to me, and we'll get some updates going on, and we'll do some highlights from that. So on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you for watching, guys, and as always, if you are interested in any of the content you see, you can access my website at www.seans-aviation.com. You can see all the latest pictures of aircraft and museums and the build logs of all of my current models and past models on that site. And if you're interested in any of this content, please click the subscribe button here on YouTube to follow more. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.